Sophia stood silently at the edge of the cemetery, watching as the casket containing her mother's body was lowered into the ground. The wind tugged at her coat, but she barely noticed. Her mind was clouded, her heart heavy with the weight of an unimaginable grief. Lena, her mother, was gone. The moment Lena had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, Sophia knew her mother's time was limited, but nothing had prepared her for the crushing reality of watching her mother slip away. Lena had always been a woman who exuded life and strength, even when times were tough. She had fought to keep Sophia's life as stable as possible, never allowing hardship to define their existence. Lena had been a beacon of hope, a light that guided Sophia through her youth and into adulthood. Now that light was extinguished, and Sophia stood alone, her only family now a grave. The grief was overwhelming. It felt like a part of her had been ripped away, leaving her adrift in an ocean of loss. Beside her, David stood, his expression distant, unreadable. He was there, physically, but mentally, he was as far away as the stars. His presence felt hollow, like an echo of a man she once knew. When her mother had fallen ill, David had been distant, retreating into himself rather than offering support. He had promised to be there, but in her time of need, his absence felt like a betrayal in itself. Sophia had tried to ignore the signs, the emotional distance, the long silences between them, the way he would lose himself in his work rather than acknowledge the pain she was going through. But now, with her mother gone, she felt the true weight of David's indifference. Her heart ached for the man she had once loved, but now she could barely recognize him. It wasn't just Lena's death that had fractured their relationship, it was everything leading up to this moment, the slow unraveling of their marriage over the years. When Sophia and David had first met, it was like a whirlwind. They had fallen in love quickly, their connection undeniable. He was her protector, her confidant. They built a life together, a life full of promise. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. The passion had faded, replaced by routine, by misunderstandings, by unspoken resentment. David, once a man of warmth and care, had become emotionally cold and distant. He had a demanding job, one that required long hours and high stress. He always claimed that he was doing it for them, for their future, for the life they had always dreamed of. But the truth was, David had stopped seeing Sophia as his partner. She was no longer the woman he wanted to fight for. She was the woman he had grown comfortable ignoring. Sophia had tried everything to bring back the spark. She had planned romantic getaways, tried to rekindle their intimacy, and had even confronted him about his emotional withdrawal. But each time, David seemed to push her further away. Now, in the wake of her mother's death, Sophia could feel the finality of their relationship. She wasn't just mourning the loss of her mother. She was mourning the loss of her marriage, the death of a love that had once seemed unbreakable. It wasn't until the funeral was over and the last of the mourners had left the cemetery that David chose to speak up. They had returned home to their quiet apartment, the weight of the day settling over them. The house felt so much emptier now, as though the very walls were mourning alongside her. "I think we need to talk," David said, his voice soft but steady. Sophia turned to face him, her heart heavy with anticipation. She knew something was coming. She had felt it in the air for months now, the unspoken tension between them. But still, when the words came, they hit her like a slap to the face. "I think we should get a divorce," David continued, his eyes avoiding hers. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled slightly, but she couldn't let him see how deeply his words cut her. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David finally met her gaze, but it wasn't with love or even regret. It was with resignation, as though he had already made up his mind. "I think it's time. We've drifted apart. I've tried to ignore it, but I can't anymore." I don't think we're right for each other anymore, Sophia. I think it's over. Sophia stood there, stunned, the grief of losing her mother flooding back in waves. She had no idea what to say. How could this be happening? She needed him now more than ever, and he was walking away from her. Is this really happening right now? She asked, feeling the numbness creep in. You're asking for a divorce while I'm mourning my mother? While I'm still trying to process everything? David's face softened, but it wasn't enough to soften the sting of his words. I didn't want to hurt you, but I've been thinking about this for a long time. You're strong, Sophia. You'll get through this. You always do. We just need different things. Sophia's vision blurred with tears, but she blinked them away. So you're leaving me now, just like that? After everything? David nodded, his voice tinged with guilt. I'm sorry. I truly am. But I think this is the only way for both of us to move forward. David's words stung, but they also made something inside Sophia shift. She felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal, but at the same time she realized something important. She didn't need him. Not like she thought she did. The pain of losing him was intense, but it was also freeing. She had spent so many years clinging to the idea of their marriage, of him, but the truth was, she had been holding on to a ghost. Her mother had always told her that she deserved someone who would stand by her no matter what, someone who would be there through thick and thin. In that moment, Sophia realized David wasn't that person. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't need him to be. She was stronger than she had given herself credit for. Sophia wiped away her tears and nodded, her decision clear. I don't want this, but I can't change it. I'm done fighting for something that doesn't exist anymore. If you want out, then you go. David stood there for a moment, clearly expecting more of a fight. But Sophia didn't give him one. She had no more energy for fights, no more patience for his emotional withdrawal. Goodbye, David, she said quietly. David hesitated, as if he was going to say something more, but then he turned and walked out of their home, leaving Sophia alone in the silence that followed. The days after David's departure were a blur of exhaustion and pain. Sophia had no idea how to begin processing everything that had happened. First, her mother's death, then the divorce. It was as though the universe had decided that Sophia was to face every possible challenge at once. But amidst the grief, there was something unexpected, a letter from her mother's lawyer. Sophia opened it with trembling hands, expecting more details about the funeral arrangements and the distribution of Lena's belongings. But when she read the words, her world shifted once again. Her mother had left her everything: the estate, the businesses, the properties, the foundation. The inheritance was worth an estimated $500 million. Sophia could hardly believe what she was reading. This was not just money. It was a legacy, a gift from her mother that she had never known existed. The shock was overwhelming. How could this be? Lena had always lived modestly, and Sophia had never been told about the extent of her mother's wealth. But now the truth was clear. Her mother had worked tirelessly, building not just wealth, but a foundation to help women who had faced the kinds of struggles Lena had overcome. The Lena Foundation, which her mother had started, was now hers to run, and it was something that Sophia could never have imagined. But as she sat there, alone in the quiet of their home, another feeling overtook her: fear. Could she handle this responsibility? She was already struggling with the loss of her mother and the collapse of her marriage. Could she really step into the shoes her mother had left behind? For the first time, Sophia felt the weight of both loss and opportunity. Sophia sat alone in her apartment, the echo of David's departure still ringing in her ears. The silence that filled the space felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in around her. She hadn't realized just how much of her emotional life had been tethered to David until he was gone. The house, once shared with a partner, now felt like a monument to all the promises that had been broken. The pain of losing her mother was still fresh, but in some ways, it was overshadowed by the sudden devastation of David's abandonment. She had expected him to be her rock, her safe place during this time of loss. But he wasn't. And the betrayal cut deeper than she had ever anticipated. He had left her while she was mourning, leaving her to face not only the death of her mother, but the unraveling of her marriage. Alone. Sophia's phone buzzed on the coffee table, a message from Grace, her closest friend and confidant. Grace had been there for Sophia through thick and thin, and she had been a constant source of support throughout Lena's illness and the funeral arrangements. Grace, how are you holding up? I'm thinking of you. If you need anything, I'm here. Sophia stared at the message for a long time, but she didn't know how to respond. How could she put into words what she was feeling? How could she explain the torrent of emotions, the grief, the anger, the sense of abandonment, swirling inside her? Finally, she typed back. Sophia, I'm not sure. Everything feels like it's falling apart. David left me. And now, this inheritance, it's all too much to process. The phone buzzed almost immediately with Grace's reply. Grace, I can't imagine how hard this must be. But listen, you're strong, Sophia. You've always been. This inheritance, it's overwhelming. But it's also a chance to make something incredible out of all this pain. You can't let it drag you down. Your mom believed in you. Now you need to believe in yourself. Sophia stared at the message, feeling a pang of gratitude for Grace's unwavering support. But as comforting as Grace's words were, they also highlighted the conflict Sophia felt inside. How could she accept this inheritance, this $500 million, when she felt so unworthy? Her mother had left it all to her, a fortune built from years of hard work and sacrifice. But Sophia didn't know if she was capable of managing such a legacy. Lena had always been the one in control, the one who knew how to navigate the world. Sophia had never been prepared for this level of responsibility. She didn't feel like the kind of person who could live up to her mother's legacy. The letter from the lawyer had been clear. Lena's legacy was now in Sophia's hands. The Lena Foundation, which her mother had founded to support women in need, was one of the primary recipients of Lena's wealth. The foundation had been the heart of Lena's life, her passion, and now it was Sophia's responsibility to keep it alive. Sophia spent the next few days going through the details of her inheritance, meeting with the lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors who had been handling her mother's affairs. The numbers were staggering, but what shocked her most wasn't the wealth. It was the weight of what her mother had built. A sprawling nonprofit empire that spanned across cities, with programs offering everything from financial support for women to mental health resources, housing, and education. Her mother had given her the opportunity to continue this work, to take the foundation to new heights. But Sophia was uncertain. How could she fill her mother's shoes? Lena had been a powerful force, a woman who commanded respect and admiration wherever she went. Sophia, on the other hand, had always been more reserved, more uncertain of her place in the world. Sophia had always admired her mother's work, but had she been prepared to lead it? The first board meeting of the Lena Foundation after Lena's death was scheduled for the following week. The thought of standing in front of a room full of powerful women, some of whom had worked alongside her mother for years, made Sophia feel nauseous. They would be looking to her for leadership, for vision, and she wasn't sure if she had it in her. The day of the board meeting arrived too quickly. Sophia found herself sitting at the head of a large conference table, surrounded by people she barely knew, though they had all known her mother for years. Grace had insisted that she accompany Sophia to the meeting, and she was glad she did. Grace sat beside her, offering her silent support as Sophia faced the group. The first person to speak was Rachel, a seasoned professional who had worked with Lena for nearly a decade. She was a tall, imposing woman, sharp-minded, and someone who carried herself with the confidence that Sophia had always admired. "Ms. Pierce," Rachel said, addressing Sophia formally, "we all know how difficult this time has been for you, and we want to assure you that we are here to support you. But as the new head of the foundation, we need to hear your vision for the future. What do you plan to do with the foundation's resources, and how will you continue Lena's work?" Sophia's throat went dry. All eyes were on her, and the room seemed to shrink. She had never liked being the center of attention, but today, there was no escaping it. She felt like a little girl in a room full of adults, struggling to find the right words. But then she remembered something Grace had said earlier. "Your mom believed in you. Now you need to believe in yourself." Sophia took a deep breath and spoke. "I know I'm not my mother," she began, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "I can't fill her shoes, but I can carry on her legacy. I believe in the foundation. I believe in its mission. And I promise you I will do everything I can to ensure it continues to help women, just as my mother intended." For the first time in what felt like forever, Sophia felt the first spark of confidence within her. The words were simple, but they were hers. And in that moment, she realized that maybe she didn't have to be exactly like Lena, she just had to be herself. Rachel nodded, her expression softening. "We're behind you, Sophia. Let's get to work." The room seemed to ease after that. The tension faded, and the discussions moved forward. Sophia didn't have all the answers, but she knew she had a team of people who were ready to help her. By the end of the meeting, Sophia felt a shift within herself. She wasn't completely sure of what the future held, but she was starting to believe that she could make it work. As the weeks passed, Sophia became more involved in the day-to-day operations of the foundation. She met with donors, organized fundraising events, and began to familiarize herself with the foundation's various programs. The team was welcoming, and Sophia felt a growing sense of purpose with every conversation. But there was still a part of her that felt guilty. She had inherited this wealth and responsibility, but she didn't feel like she had earned it. She had done nothing to deserve the $500 million her mother had left her. The guilt was suffocating at times, making it difficult for her to enjoy the privileges that came with her inheritance. There were nights when Sophia would lie awake in bed, her mind racing. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed her mother's legacy? The fear of failure loomed large, threatening to overshadow the potential she had to do great things with the foundation. One night, as she sat in her office late, going over documents, Grace texted her again. "Don't let the guilt eat you alive. You deserve this, Sophia. You're doing your mom's work, and that's what matters. You're already making a difference. One step at a time." Sophia stared at the message for a long time. Grace's words were simple, but they felt like a lifeline in the storm of emotions Sophia was navigating. She wasn't her mother, but she could still carry her mother's flame. And maybe, just maybe, she would learn how to be the woman she needed to be. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Sophia began to feel more in control of the foundation. At first, the sheer weight of her mother's legacy had felt suffocating, but now, Sophia found herself becoming more comfortable in her role. The team at the Lena Foundation was supportive, and the more time she spent with them, the more she realized that her mother had surrounded herself with like-minded people who were dedicated to continuing her mission. Sophia had been hesitant to make any big changes, afraid of rocking the boat and damaging the legacy her mother had built. But as the months went by, she began to see opportunities for growth. One of the foundation's main programs, which provided financial support to women who were starting their own businesses, had grown stagnant. The initial enthusiasm had faded, and many of the women involved felt as though they had hit a wall. Sophia recognized this problem during a visit to one of the foundation's funded businesses. The woman running the bakery was talented, but she had no experience managing the finances, and her once promising venture was struggling to stay afloat. Sophia understood that they needed to give more than just money. They needed to offer mentorship, education, and continued support. At the next board meeting, Sophia suggested a new initiative, a mentorship program that would connect successful female entrepreneurs with the women the foundation was supporting. She was nervous, unsure of how the team would respond. But when she finished presenting her idea, Rachel, the board member who had been most skeptical of Sophia's leadership, spoke up. "This is exactly what we need," Rachel said, her voice full of approval. "Your mother would have been proud. Let's make it happen." Sophia felt a surge of relief, but more than that, she felt pride. For the first time since taking over the foundation, she felt like she was really contributing, like she was building something that would truly make a difference. As the days passed, more programs were revamped, and the foundation began to feel like her own. Sophia worked tirelessly, meeting with donors, expanding their reach, and making sure that the resources were being used efficiently. But she didn't let herself rest on her laurels. Every night she stayed up late working on proposals and strategizing for the future. There was still so much to do, and Sophia wasn't about to let her mother's legacy fade into the background. But despite her success at work, there were times when the weight of the inheritance still felt like too much. She missed Lena's guidance, the way her mother had always known exactly what to do. Sophia found herself wishing, at times, that she could turn to her mom for advice, to ask her how to move forward in a world that seemed to be shifting under her feet. It was on one of those long, lonely nights that David showed up again. The doorbell rang at her apartment, and when Sophia opened the door, there he stood, looking more disheveled than she had ever seen him, his eyes tired and filled with regret. "David," Sophia said, her voice cold. She hadn't seen him in months, not since the day he had left her while she was grieving her mother. "I know this is unexpected," he began, his voice tinged with a mix of guilt and hope. "But I needed to see you. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about us, about what I did. And I want to apologize." Sophia's heart raced, but she held her ground. "You've had months, David, months to think about it. And now, you want to show up when things are starting to look up for me?" "I know it's not fair," he admitted, stepping back slightly as though bracing for her anger. "But I couldn't live with myself anymore. What I did was wrong. You were dealing with so much, and I left you when you needed me most. I'm sorry." Sophia stood there, her heart torn in two. Part of her wanted to lash out, to demand answers for his betrayal, but another part of her felt a deep sorrow for the man who had once been her partner, who had once promised to be by her side through thick and thin. "You hurt me, David," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "You left me when I needed you. I lost my mother, and you couldn't even stand by me. I can't just forget that." "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he said softly. "But I want to be here for you now. I want to help. I can't undo what I did, but I can show you that I'm willing to try." Sophia felt a wave of confusion wash over her. She had spent so long trying to rebuild herself, trying to move forward, and now David was standing in front of her, asking for a second chance. But Sophia knew that she couldn't let the past define her. She had worked too hard to get where she was. "I appreciate your apology, David," she said, her voice firm. "But I don't think we can go back to what we were. I'm not the same person I was when you left. I've changed, and so have you." David looked down, as if her words had struck him to the core. He nodded slowly, his expression one of resignation. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm here, if you ever need anything." Sophia took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I need to move forward, David, and that doesn't include you. I'm building something new, something for myself, for women who need support, and I won't let the past hold me back." David stood there for a moment longer, his gaze locked with hers. Then, without another word, he turned and left, disappearing into the night. In the days following David's visit, Sophia found herself thinking about the past, about the good times, the times when they had been happy. But she quickly reminded herself that the woman she had become wasn't defined by those memories. She wasn't the same person who had clung to a relationship that no longer served her. She had grown, and she had learned. She wasn't afraid to stand alone. The decision to move forward without David was painful, but it was necessary. She couldn't afford to keep looking back. She had a foundation to run, a legacy to honor, and a future to build. She didn't need David or anyone else to define her path. Sophia started to pour more of her energy into her work, continuing to expand the foundation's reach and making more connections with potential partners and donors. She used her grief and pain as fuel for her new mission, and the results were starting to show. More women were benefiting from the foundation's programs. More lives were being changed. And as Sophia stood in front of a room full of donors, giving a speech about the future of the Lena Foundation, she finally felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She was the woman her mother had always believed her to be. She was a leader, a fighter, and above all, a survivor. Sophia had come a long way since taking over the Lena Foundation. The fear and self-doubt that had once gripped her heart had given way to a quiet confidence. Her leadership was no longer defined by what her mother had done, but by what she herself was capable of. She was learning to trust her instincts, even when the decisions were hard, and she was beginning to see the impact of her choices. The mentorship program she had initiated months ago was beginning to bear fruit. Women who had once been stuck in dead-end jobs were now starting their own businesses with the support of seasoned entrepreneurs who had walked the same path. Sophia had never expected the foundation to have such a rapid turnaround, but the momentum was undeniable. Donors were more eager than ever to contribute, and the organization's visibility in the public eye was growing. One morning, as she sat in her office going over reports, Sophia's phone rang. It was Rachel, the board member who had become one of Sophia's closest allies over the past few months. "Sophia, I think we've got some incredible news," Rachel's voice crackled with excitement. "We've just secured a partnership with a major tech company. They want to work with us to provide training for women in the tech industry, coding boot camps, job placement programs, the works. This is exactly what we need to expand our reach." Sophia's heart raced as Rachel continued to explain the details. The tech company's involvement would provide funding, resources, and the kind of industry connections the foundation had never had before. This partnership was a game changer, a rare opportunity to help a new generation of women break into a field that had historically been dominated by men. "I can't believe this is happening," Sophia said, trying to absorb the news. "This could change everything for us, for the women we serve. But what's the catch? There has to be a catch." Rachel chuckled. "Well, you're right to be cautious. They want us to take on a larger responsibility, though. They're asking if you would be willing to go public with this partnership. Interviews, press conferences, the whole 9 yards. They want your face on this." Sophia leaned back in her chair, considering the offer. She had always been behind the scenes, working to make the foundation successful, but now, the spotlight was shifting toward her. She was being asked to step out from the shadow of her mother's legacy and take ownership of this new era. It was both thrilling and terrifying. The idea of being thrust into the public eye was overwhelming, but Sophia knew that this was a chance to elevate the foundation to an entirely new level. If she accepted, she would become the face of the movement, the symbol of what the Lena Foundation stood for. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady but her heart pounding. "This is the opportunity we've been waiting for. I won't let it slip away." With the partnership secured, the next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Sophia found herself preparing for interviews, meeting with the press, and rehearsing her speeches. The idea of being in the public eye was a far cry from the quiet, reserved woman she had been just a few months ago. But she was learning to navigate the pressure. The first major press conference was scheduled in just a few days. The tech company was hosting an event to announce the partnership, and they had asked Sophia to join the panel of speakers. She spent hours rehearsing her speech, making sure that every word was perfect, every sentence aligned with the foundation's mission. But as the day of the event approached, the weight of everything began to sink in. This wasn't just a press conference. This was a moment that could define her entire future. If she nailed it, the foundation would gain the kind of visibility that would secure its place in the public consciousness. But if she faltered, she knew the consequences could be disastrous. The night before the event, Sophia sat in her office, staring at the speech she had written. She was exhausted. The pressure had been building for weeks, and now it was almost too much to bear. For the first time in a long time, she felt a wave of self-doubt rush over her. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she let everyone down? Her phone buzzed. It was Grace, her closest friend and support system. Grace. Big day tomorrow, huh? Just wanted to remind you that you've got this. You've already proven to everyone around you that you're more than capable. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be you. You've been doing this work for months now, and you've made such an impact. Don't let the fear of the spotlight stop you from showing the world who you really are. Sophia smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. Grace always knew what to say, and in that moment, Sophia realized something important. She wasn't just standing on the shoulders of her mother's legacy. She was creating her own. She took a deep breath, set the speech aside, and walked out of her office. Tomorrow was a new day, a new chapter, and she was ready for it. The press conference. Facing the fear. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the venue, her stomach a bundle of nerves. The room was filled with reporters, cameras, and executives from the tech company, all buzzing with anticipation. Sophia had spent years avoiding attention, preferring to stay behind the scenes and let her mother's legacy shine. But today, the spotlight was on her, and there was no escaping it. As she took her seat at the panel, the weight of the moment hit her like a wave. She felt the eyes of the room on her, all waiting for her to speak. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to calm down. She had a job to do, and she was going to do it. When it was her turn to speak, Sophia stood up and faced the audience. The camera lights flashed, and for a moment, everything seemed to blur together. But then, she found her voice. "This isn't just about money or funding," she began, her voice clear and steady. "It's about creating real, lasting change. It's about providing women with the resources they need to succeed, whether it's in the tech industry, business, or anywhere else. At the Lena Foundation, we believe that every woman deserves the chance to fulfill her potential. And this partnership is just the beginning." Sophia spoke from the heart, her words flowing with a conviction she hadn't known she had. The more she spoke, the more confident she became. She wasn't just talking about the foundation. She was talking about herself, about what she believed in, about her vision for the future. By the time she finished her speech, the room was silent for a moment before the applause erupted. It was overwhelming, but in that moment, Sophia felt a rush of accomplishment. She had faced her fears head-on and had come out stronger for it. The press conference was a success. The Lena Foundation was officially in the spotlight, and Sophia had proven that she was more than capable of leading it into the future. As the press conference ended, Sophia was approached by Daniel, a well-known philanthropist and one of the key executives from the tech company. He shook her hand firmly, his eyes gleaming with admiration. "You did a fantastic job, Sophia," he said, his voice full of respect. "I think we're going to do some incredible things together. But there's more I want to talk to you about. I've been following the Foundation's work, and I have an opportunity I think would be perfect for you." Sophia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of opportunity?" Daniel smiled. "There's a major international summit for women's empowerment coming up next month. They're looking for someone to keynote the event. I think you're the perfect fit. This could be a game changer for the Foundation." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. The summit was one of the biggest events in the world for women's rights and empowerment, and being asked to speak there was an incredible honor. It was also a huge responsibility. But as she looked at Daniel, she realized that this was another turning point in her journey. Another chance to prove to herself and to the world that she was more than just the woman who inherited her mother's fortune. She was a leader in her own right. "I'd be honored," Sophia replied, her voice filled with determination. As the conversation continued, Sophia's mind raced with possibilities. The summit could be the next step in the foundation's growth, and it could solidify her place as a leader not just in the nonprofit world, but in the global conversation about women's rights. And so, Sophia made her decision. She was going to take this opportunity, just as she had taken every other challenge that had come her way. The future was hers to shape. The International Summit was held in a grand convention center overlooking the city's skyline. The venue was filled with influential women from around the world, politicians, business leaders, activists, and philanthropists, all gathered to discuss and celebrate the progress of women's rights. But this year, there was a new voice in the room, Sophia Pierce, the new head of the Lena Foundation. The invitation to speak at the summit had come as a surprise to Sophia, but she had accepted without hesitation. It wasn't just about the exposure. It was about using this platform to amplify the voices of the women her foundation served. She had worked tirelessly to get to this point, and now it was her time to stand on the world stage. The morning of her keynote address, Sophia stood backstage, her heart racing. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on her. This was the culmination of everything she had fought for, the legacy of her mother, her own hard work, and the belief that she could make a real difference. "Are you ready?" Grace's voice brought her back to the present. She turned to see her friend standing by her side, a reassuring smile on her face. "I'm nervous," Sophia admitted, glancing down at her prepared speech. "I've never done anything like this before. What if I mess it up?" Grace placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've got this. You've done everything right so far. Just speak from your heart. That's what got you here." Sophia smiled, grateful for Grace's steady presence. "Thanks. I'll do my best." When her name was called, the room went silent. Sophia took a deep breath, walked out onto the stage, and faced the audience. The spotlight hit her, but instead of feeling like a weight, it felt like a promise to herself, to her mother, and to every woman in the room who was watching her. She began her speech with a simple statement. "I stand before you today not just as the head of a foundation, but as a woman who has struggled, who has fought, and who has learned that there is no greater strength than the strength we give each other." Sophia spoke passionately about the need for systemic change to empower women, not just with resources but with opportunities. She talked about her mother's vision and how the Lena Foundation had expanded that vision into new areas such as tech, entrepreneurship, and education. But most importantly, she spoke about the resilience of women, their capacity to rise, even in the face of unimaginable challenges. Her words were met with a standing ovation. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt fully seen, fully acknowledged.
This wasn't just a speech. It was the embodiment of everything she had worked for, a beacon of hope for women everywhere. As she stepped off the stage, she was overwhelmed with emotion. Grace rushed over to her, pulling her into a tight hug. "You did it!" Grace exclaimed. "That was incredible. You're a force now, Sophia. There's no going back." Sophia smiled, tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd be standing here, Grace, but I'm glad I am." Despite the success of the summit, there were still unresolved issues from Sophia's past that weighed heavily on her heart. The pain of David's betrayal had lingered in the background of her progress, an unhealed wound that had been pushed aside in favor of focusing on her work. But now, as she stood on the precipice of her future, Sophia realized that she couldn't truly move forward without addressing the past, without finding closure. A few days after the summit, David reached out again. This time, the message wasn't about apologies or reconciliation. It was a simple request to meet. He wanted to speak to her, face to face. Sophia had wrestled with the decision. She didn't need David in her life anymore, but part of her still longed for closure. So she agreed. They met at a quiet cafe, the same one where they had once spent hours talking, laughing, and dreaming about their future. David arrived early, his face weathered by time, but there was a softness in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. "I'm not here to try to win you back, Sophia," David said, his voice low. "I know that's not possible. I just wanted to apologize again and tell you how proud I am of you. You've become the woman I always hoped you would be. I see you now in a way I never did before." Sophia felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of finality. David's words, while kind, didn't change the fact that their paths were no longer meant to be intertwined. She had outgrown that chapter of her life. "Thank you," she replied softly. "But I've learned something important. I don't need anyone else to define my worth. I'm not the woman you left behind anymore. I'm the woman I've chosen to become." David nodded, his eyes filled with both regret and understanding. "I get it. I really do. I just wanted to make sure you knew that I'm rooting for you, no matter what." Sophia smiled, a bittersweet acknowledgement of the past. "Take care, David." As they parted ways, Sophia realized that she didn't need David's approval or apology to move forward. She had already found her strength, her purpose. And that was all she needed. The following months saw Sophia's life continue to unfold in unexpected ways. The Lena Foundation grew exponentially with new programs, new partnerships, and a broader global reach. Sophia became a sought-after speaker, traveling the world to share her story and advocate for women's empowerment. She had become not only a symbol of resilience but also a force of change, leading the charge for a better future. But as much as her professional success grew, Sophia's personal growth was the most rewarding part. She had come to understand the importance of self-love and independence. No longer did she need the validation of others to feel worthy. She had discovered that the real power lay within herself, in her choices, her actions, and her ability to rise after every fall. One afternoon, as she sat in her office overlooking the city, Sophia received a letter from the lawyer who had handled her mother's estate. It was a final piece of the puzzle, a letter from Lena. Written in the months before her passing. In the letter, Lena expressed her pride in Sophia and her belief that one day, Sophia would surpass everything she had accomplished. She wrote that she knew her daughter was capable of more than just carrying on the foundation's work. She had always known that Sophia would lead the world in her own way. Tears filled Sophia's eyes as she read the letter. Her mother's faith in her had been the guiding light that had brought her this far. And now, as Sophia stood at the helm of the Lena Foundation, she realized that she was no longer living in the shadow of her mother's legacy. She was creating her own. Sophia closed the letter, a quiet smile on her face. She had made it. Not because of the wealth, the title, or the spotlight, but because she had finally become the woman she was always meant to be. The future was hers, and she was ready to lead the way.